You feel it the moment you walk away from them. It isn't just physical fatigue. It's a heavy, hollow exhaustion that makes you feel like a piece of your identity was just chipped away. Society tells you this is normal, that you're just an introvert who needs to recharge. They are lying to you. Socializing in the modern world is not just draining your energy. It is actively eroding your cognitive architecture. Every forced interaction is a socially acceptable act of self-destruction. You've probably done this before. Laughed at a joke you didn't find funny or nodded when you internally disagreed. I used to do this too. Most guys don't realize that once you see what this is actually doing to your mind, you will never look at a crowded room the same way again. We live under a collective delusion that human connection is an unquestionable good. From the classroom to the office, you are graded on your ability to play well with others. But as the philosopher Schopenhauer observed, the crowd is a cognitive hazard. To be palatable to the masses, you must necessarily forfeit a massive portion of your individual will. Think about the sheer amount of mental glucose required to suppress a genuine reaction. When someone says something ignorant and you swallow the truth to maintain harmony, you are fighting your own nervous system. This is performance fatigue. Your body isn't tired from movement. It is depleted from the heavy lifting of maintaining a fabricated persona. The nice guy trap is a double bind. If you are fake, they eventually sense it and reject you. But if you show your unvarnished truth, they ostracize you. When you spend your life managing the perceptions of others, your own internal compass begins to spin uncontrollably. You become a psychological Frankenstein's monster, built from borrowed desires. But the most dangerous signal you send is this: explaining yourself. In this video, we are breaking that cycle. You will learn how to transition from a passive participant to a ruthless curator of your own environment. I'm going to show you how to weaponize distance so that you are no longer treated like a public utility, but like a luxury. Subscribe to Untold Realities before the herd walks you off a cliff. You've probably done this before. You're on a date. She says something you completely disagree with, but you nod and smile anyway because you don't want to ruin the vibe. I used to do this too. I thought I was being nice, but in reality I was suffering from performance fatigue. This isn't just a minor social adjustment, it is a severe physiological response where your body isn't tired from movement, but depleted from the heavy lifting of maintaining a fabricated persona. Every time you fake enthusiasm or swallow your truth to stay palatable, you are actively eroding your own cognitive architecture. You think you are merely playing a game, putting on a mask for the dinner party or the date, and taking it off when you return home with your core intact. But the human brain is highly plastic. It adapts to the shape of the container it is forced into. When you constantly pour yourself into the shallow molds of social expectation, your intellect permanently loses its depth. You aren't building a connection. You're building a prison out of a fabricated persona that eventually becomes a parasite, feeding on your mental energy until there is nothing left of the host. You are not just acting a part. You are slowly mutating into the hollow character you pretend to be. This forced interaction literally depletes the executive functioning of your prefrontal cortex, meaning you are frying your own circuitry just to prove you are a nice guy. You are burning the fuel meant for building your empire just to keep the people around you warm, only to feel a heavy, hollow exhaustion the moment you walk away. Society demands this performance, yet instinctively despises the performer because, if they sense you are being fake, they will ultimately reject you anyway. You have spent the entire day giving away pieces of your mind to someone who doesn't even value the fragments they take. Stop treating your cognitive reserve like an infinite resource. Every hour spent navigating the treacherous waters of another person's ego is an hour of high-level intellectual processing you can never get back. Most guys don't realize this, but the energy you spend on a date isn't just physical. It is a resource-heavy cognitive tax known as self-monitoring. You think you are being attentive, But in reality, you are trapped in a high-stakes simulation where you are constantly scanning for micro-expressions, trying to decode every shift in her tone to ensure she remains happy. I used to do this too. I believed that by anticipating her emotional needs and filtering my own authentic thoughts, I was being the perfect date. But while you are busy calculating how to make her comfortable, a dangerous psychological shift occurs. You stop being a man of intent and start being a reactionary machine. You are playing defense in a game you never chose to enter, letting the environment dictate your identity. This hyper-awareness triggers your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, placing your nervous system in a mild state of fight or flight. Because social decorum prevents you from doing either, you default to fawning, an act of aggressive people-pleasing designed to neutralize social friction. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny and agree with opinions you actually despise, all to maintain a fragile harmony. This isn't kindness. It is an exorbitant tax on your prefrontal cortex that depletes your executive functioning. By the time the night ends, you feel hollowed out. Not because the conversation was deep, but because the labor of maintaining a fabricated persona is the most exhausting work you will ever perform. You have fried your own circuitry just to prove you are a nice guy, burning the mental fuel meant for building your own empire just to keep a stranger warm. You are treating your cognitive reserve like an infinite battery, forgetting that every hour spent managing her perception of you is an hour of high-level intellectual power you can never get back. Stop paying the tax. The moment you stop monitoring her reactions and start owning your own presence, the game finally ends and your actual life begins. We must address a psychological reality that civilized society tries desperately to hide. Stupidity is contagious, and mediocrity is a highly transmissible disease. Since the moment you were placed in a classroom, you were graded on your ability to play well with others, conditioned to believe that being highly social is the pinnacle of psychological health. But in the high-stakes theater of modern dating, this social health is a trap. Arthur Schopenhauer understood that to exist within society, a person must necessarily forfeit a massive portion of their individual will. You cannot be fully yourself and simultaneously be palatable to the masses. When you socialize specifically to fit in, you are voluntarily walking into an environment that strips you of your vitality. A group of humans does not operate at the intellectual capacity of its smartest member. It operates at the emotional frequency of its lowest common denominator. This is a survival mechanism encoded in our DNA, designed to bring outliers back to the center to maintain group cohesion. If you bring a nuanced, powerful thought into a crowded room, it will be rejected, not because it is wrong, but because the crowd demands simple narratives and predictable scripts. To match the others, you have to shrink yourself. Most guys don't realize this, but your mirror neurons force you to synchronize with this lower frequency, causing you to adopt the trivial anxieties and manufactured controversies of your peers. You are being infected by their lack of depth. Consider the historical example of the courtier, brilliant individuals whose minds atrophied because they spent their days managing the petty egos of the royal court. You are acting as a courtier to the modern crowd every time you engage in shallow conversation just to pass the time. You are training your brain to focus on the trivial and teaching your mind that depth is unnecessary. This is the true danger of over-socializing. It alters your baseline of reality. You begin to doubt your own intellect and wonder if your desire for deep meaning is actually a flaw. You amputate the best parts of your mind so that the pieces fit neatly into the puzzle of the group, trading your unique destiny for the comfort of the herd. But remember this cold truth. The lowest common denominator wins the group's approval, but it never commands a woman's genuine desire. You have spent the day giving away pieces of your mind to people who do not even value the fragments they take. If you spend enough time breathing in this mediocrity, you will eventually lose the ability to lead yourself. The most dangerous signal you can send in any social or romantic hierarchy is the constant urge to justify your existence. Most men don't realize this, but the moment you start explaining your choices, you are subconsciously asking for permission. You think you are being clear or considerate, but to the female subconscious, a man who explains is a man who is terrified of being rejected. This is the specific behavior shift that separates the nice guy from the man of high status. You must stop explaining. When you over-explain your schedule, your boundaries, or your ambitions, you are essentially pinging your environment like a bat using sonar, desperately waiting for an echo of approval to prove your choices are valid. I used to do this too. I thought that if she understood my logic, she would respect my decision. In reality, I was handing over my power. An autonomous man understands that his will should operate without friction. He sits quietly, formulates a desire, and executes a plan without requiring a single ounce of external validation. Think about the biological reality of high-level social dynamics. In any group, the person with the most power is the one who speaks the least about their why. They don't need to manage your perception because they aren't hostage to your opinion. When you limit your availability and offer no apology for it, the law of scarcity takes over. You transition from being a public utility, always available to vent to and always ready to explain yourself, into a luxury that must be earned. This isn't about being rude. It's about the strategic weaponization of distance. Every time you swallow the urge to justify a no, you are training your brain that your internal North Star is more important than the temporary comfort of the herd. Stop acting as a courtier to the modern crowd. The next time you make a move, don't narrate it. Let the silence speak for your confidence. By refusing to explain, you signal that you are the architect of your own reality, and there is nothing more attractive than a man who is already colonized by his own original thoughts. To understand the anatomy of your transformation, you must first recognize the biological desperation of your current state. You've probably done this before. Your phone buzzes with a request for your time, and you immediately begin drafting a digital manifesto. You send a sprawling paragraph explaining exactly why you're busy, detailing your schedule, and practically begging for her understanding because you are terrified she might get mad. In clinical terms, you are fawning, an aggressive, submissive, people-pleasing response used by the nervous system to neutralize a perceived social threat. You believe you are being polite, but your brain is actually in a state of mild fight or flight, treating her potential disapproval as a predator it must pacify. By offering this long-winded justification, you are signaling that your time is not your own, and that she is the authority who must grant you permission to be occupied. You are acting as a public utility, always available, easily understood, and therefore entirely devoid of value. The transformation begins when you decide to stop being an open book and start being a strategist. The after version of this interaction is jarringly simple. When she reaches out, you say, "I'm busy," and you leave it at that. There is no second sentence. There is no apology to soften the blow. There is no justification to prove you aren't lying. Most guys don't realize this, but the moment you stop explaining, you weaponize distance. You're no longer negotiating your desires or seeking external validation to confirm your existence. By cutting the umbilical cord of constant communication, you force the law of scarcity to take effect. When you are rarely seen and never fully explained, you transition from being a common commodity to a luxury that must be earned. This shift does more than change her perception of you. It resets your own baseline of reality. As you pull back from the noise of constant social management, your cortisol levels drop and the mental fog of performance fatigue begins to lift. You are no longer burning the intellectual fuel meant for building your empire just to keep someone else warm. In this newly acquired distance, you find the sovereignty of your own will, trading the hollow comfort of the herd for the quiet power of a man who finally knows his own worth. We must address the most painful realization of all. The reason you subject yourself to this mental degradation is because you believe it cures loneliness. You move through the world under the delusion that being surrounded by people is the antidote to feeling isolated. But the psychological reality is the exact opposite. Arthur Schopenhauer observed with brutal precision that true loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of understanding. Being alone in a quiet room is peaceful, but being in a room full of people who fundamentally misinterpret who you are is the most profound loneliness a human being can experience. When you socialize relentlessly as the nice guy, you attract people who are drawn to the mask you wear. They become deeply attached to the accommodating, agreeable, and diluted version of you that you present to the world. They call you a friend, they invite you out, and they praise your character, but they do not actually know you. They know the avatar you created to survive them. Therefore, every time they applaud your kindness, it feels hollow in your chest because your subconscious knows they are not applauding the man. They are applauding the performance. This creates a terrifying psychological trap. You reach a point where you cannot drop the mask because you know, with cold certainty, that if you do, they will leave. Yet, as long as you continue to wear it, you feel entirely unseen. You have become a prisoner in a cage of your own design, surrounded by wardens who call themselves your friends. It is a shallow transaction where you trade your authenticity for the mere presence of warm bodies. Think of your closest circle right now. If you were to speak your absolute, unvarnished truth today, if you revealed your darkest ambitions, your true opinions on their choices, and your actual perspective on the world, how many of them would still be standing beside you tomorrow? If the answer is none, you do not have friends. You have hostages, and you are holding yourself hostage alongside them. The great minds and strategists do not fear this isolation. They understand that to be exceptional, you must be willing to be misunderstood by the ordinary. They prefer the quiet dignity of their own company to the exhausting hollow theater of the crowd. The cold truth is that the men who actually move the world do not fear isolation. They weaponize it. While you are busy exhausting yourself in the theater of the crowd, the strategists and the outliers are embracing the quiet dignity of their own company. They understand a fundamental law of power that you have been conditioned to ignore. To be exceptional, you must be willing to be misunderstood by the ordinary. They don't seek companions to fill a void, they seek equals. And if those equals cannot be found, they would rather stand alone than dilute their intellect to fit in. Here is the twist that most men never realize. The reason she isn't attracted to you isn't that you're too nice. It's that you have no internal North Star. Because you have spent your life relentlessly socializing and managing perceptions, you have become a psychological Frankenstein's monster, built from the discarded opinions and borrowed desires of the 5 people you spend the most time with. You have no original monologue because you've used the noise of others as an anesthetic to drown out the realization that you have no thoughts of your own. You are a reactionary machine, playing defense in a game you never chose to enter. To win, you must stop being a public utility and start being a luxury. You must be willing to let the herd walk off the cliff without you. What should you actually do after watching this? Start tonight. When someone asks you for a favor or demands a reason why you can't attend an event, give them a one-sentence answer with zero explanation. Do not justify, do not over-explain, and do not apologize. Feel the immediate social friction that follows. It will be uncomfortable. Sit in that discomfort. That is not a sign of failure. It is the feeling of your power returning as you stop the bleeding of your own mental energy. You are finally reclaiming your autonomy and the sovereignty of your individual will. Subscribe to Untold Realities to keep your edge sharp. Don't let the herd walk you off a cliff.